Thanks for joining us on Chicago Tonight. I'm Paris Schutz. Brandis Friedman has the evening off. Here's what we're looking at.
We will protect our migrants.
Following allegations of sexual abuse against asylum seekers, calls to move migrants out of all Chicago police stations grow louder. A failed attempt from Michael Madigan to suppress calls in the racketeering case. That and more from our Spotlight Politics team. Piping plover Imani has some new friends at Montrose Beach. A WTTW exclusive look at this major development. And a local artist teaches traditional Ukrainian glass painting to raise awareness of the war in her home country. And now to some of today's top stories. Very stormy night in Chicago. Much of the city, Cook and surrounding counties, is under a tornado watch until 10 as a round of severe weather moves in from the west. This as heavy rains have already pelted the area. The National Weather Service has also issued a flood warning for southeastern Cook, DuPage, and Will counties until 7 p.m. tonight. The rain has come and gone during the day, with forecasters warning of potential downpours of 1 to 2 inches per hour. And more than 400 flights have been canceled today at Chicago's airports due to this weather. O'Hare has had 374 cancellations so far, and Midway 35. Meanwhile, flight delays are running a little over 20 minutes right now at each airport. And Chicago Mayor Brandon Johnson says the city's Office of Emergency Management and Communications is monitoring the conditions and says residents should call 311 for any flooding issues. The mayor is also urging residents not to take extra long showers, do dishes, or laundry during the storms, as it could put more strain on the city's sewer system as it tries to move all the storm water. And up next, the latest on allegations Chicago police officers had improper sexual relations with migrants staying in police stations. That's right after this.
Chicago Tonight is made possible in part by Alexandra and John Nichols, the Jim and Kay Mabey family, the Polk Brothers Foundation, and the support of these donors.
Local organizations are demanding answers from the Chicago Police Department after claims that police officers at the 10th District Station had sexual relations with migrants. For months, asylum seekers have been sleeping in police districts across the city. Chicago Tonight's Joanna Hernandez joins with more about a protest that was held outside the Civilian Office of Police Accountability today. Joanna, what went on at this protest?
Well, Paris, first off, we don't know exactly what happened or if in fact there was a crime, because the police department is not saying anything. At this point, all we know is that there's sexual misconduct allegations involving multiple police officers and possibly underage migrants. This news has not sat well with the Little Village Community Council and other activists who've been at the forefront of helping asylum seekers. Today, a handful of people gathered outside COPA headquarters, demanding a further investigation into the police officers accused of inappropriate conduct.
We will hold these individuals to the extent of the law. They are not above the law. And we are making sure that these migrants, these asylum seekers, have a voice.
According to multiple reports, several police officers are being investigated for allegedly having sexual relations with asylum seekers camping out in the 10th District. Those at the rally today tell me the claims came from some migrants staying at the police station. One activist tells me that a child is said to have been involved. A Venezuelan asylum seeker also spoke at the rally with a message to others in her position.
Que no sea consensuado, bien sea en las estaciones de policía o en los refugios, hablen, llamen al 311. Vuelvo y digo, el Concilio de la Villita nos ayuda.
COPA has since put out a statement stating they are investigating the details of these claims. However, activists in Little Village want more transparency from COPA, asking for the officers' names to be released to the public, among other demands.
The demands are, 1, if you are saying transparency, show us that transparency. 2, there should be a civilian-only board, meaning any civilian on that board cannot have any type of relationship with the Chicago police ever. 3rd, there is asylum seekers currently in their office that are obviously not safe. What are they going to do to ensure the safetyness of these people?
As for the police department, an official tells me it's still an ongoing investigation and didn't say if the accused officers have been reprimanded. In Paris, if these severe allegations are true, these people, of course, want those officers fired and charged.
I know the CPD and COPA investigating, but still so many questions that we all have unanswered here. Joanna, thanks so much. And up next, new details in the Michael Madigan corruption case. That and more from our Spotlight Politics team, so please stay with us. New efforts from Michael Madigan's attorneys to suppress key evidence in his upcoming alleged bribery trial. A battle among Chicago's Democrats for political power on the city's northwest side, and fallout from allegations of hazing and racism in Northwestern University's football team. Here with all that and more is our Spotlight Politics team, Heather Sharon, and special guest Hannah Meisel with Capital News, Illinois. Thank you both for being here. Hannah, what is this evidence here that Madigan defense attorneys are trying to suppress here? Meanwhile, the prosecutors are saying this is just a flimsy effort to create some air of impropriety where none exists.
Right. So Madigan is accused of, among many other things, steering business toward his private law firm, his property tax firm. And what Madigan's defense lawyers are trying to do is suppress wiretaps that came out of former alderman turned government mole Danny Solis way back in 2014. Solis and a developer who turned out was also cooperating with the feds met in Madigan's law office to discuss the redevelopment of a parcel of land in Chinatown. And basically, this became the basis of wiretaps in the future that would end up in this indictment. And so the defense attorneys say, Solis himself has said that there was nothing improper about this. In fact, I would have probably, as the then head of the zoning committee at Chicago City Council, approved the change anyway.
So maybe that's why defense attorneys are saying, hey, why does this need to be admitted into the trial? Heather, this is part of the back and forth of pretrial motions before we have a trial. What else have we learned from these latest filings?
Well, they really make the starkest case to date by prosecutors that Michael Madigan, while the most powerful politician in Illinois, was basically running a criminal enterprise, abusing his power as an elected official to benefit not just himself, but his associates, which is very similar to the charges that convicted 4 former ComEd executives and lobbyists just a couple of months ago.
The so-called ComEd 4, a lot of parallels, a Venn diagram that does kind of run together in both of these cases. So, Hannah, federal prosecutors also detailed wiretapped conversations of Tim Mapes, who's also charged himself in his own case. Remind us where he fits into this whole picture.
So Tim Mapes spent nearly 3 decades as Mike Madigan's chief of staff, along with positions as clerk of the Illinois House and executive director of the Democratic Party of Illinois under Chairman Madigan. This man was the right-hand man of Mike Madigan. And so I
think people describe it. He made the trains run on time.
Yes, and so in this newest filing, the feds are for the first time describing some of the wiretap phone calls between Madigan and Mike McLean, who was one of the 4 convicted and who also stands convicted in the separate Madigan trial, which starts next spring. And so basically the phone calls show just how close the 2 men are. They had a relationship independent of Madigan, but also because of Madigan, how loyal they were, to each other. And, basically Mapes is accused of lying to the grand jury when they sought, his testimony about McLean's actions and his involvement with Madigan's so-called enterprise.
Right.
And so Mapes, even though he was granted immunity, the feds determined he had lied, and so hit him with a count of perjury and count of
Right.
obstruction.
So as you say, Mapes and McLean, these two very close confidants to Madigan, involved in the Madigan case, but also connected to this, facing charges of their own here. And then you brought up the ComEd 4, Heather. They're attempting to appeal their conviction to the 7th Circuit U.S. Court of Appeals. On what grounds?
Well, essentially, Anne Pramaggiore saying, look, I'm innocent. This verdict was incorrect and there was rife with error. That is a really high bar to clear in the appellate court. But all of these appeals will stretch out the case and potentially delay any jail time that these 4 executives will serve. And since they can afford these sort of lawyers and court cases, it's in their best interest to stretch it out.
So, I mean, are they paying for it out of their own pocket or ComEd?
Well, it depends. So the lobbyists aren't getting paid, their defenses aren't paid by ComEd, but Anne Pramaggiore, who was the CEO, part of her employment agreement sort of set up these coverage unless that a conviction is upheld. So that has yet to be determined.
Because I would assume these are big paydays for attorneys here. So, and that was going to be my next question, Hannah. When do you think we're going to see, actual sentencing recommendations from the judge?
Well, so shortly after the convictions were handed down in early May, we heard that the actual sentencing will hold off until January, which is a really long time for these people to kind of sit in jeopardy. And, Scott Lassar, the Anne Pramaggiori's attorney, former, U.S. attorney for the Northern District here, he said right away that we're going to appeal. And this is also on the grounds of not only, was it specific to the jury trial that we had, but also because the jury was basically not responsible for asking itself, was there a true quid pro quo here? Really, the standard here in the 7th Circuit is, was there a thing of value? But in other circuits, the quid pro quo standard is the standard. And so it's very possible that this could end up in the U.S. Supreme Court, or a similar case could, which could then, determine the outcome retroactively.
And again, you probably need ComEd's deep pockets to fund this case all the way to the Supreme Court if that's where it's going to go. Meanwhile, back at the city level, Heather, Marissa Novara, she was the housing commissioner under Mayor Lightfoot. She announced she's leaving this week. What is her legacy?
Well, she was really brought on by Lori Lightfoot to address sort of the legacy of segregation in Chicago, where you have affordable housing concentrated on the south and the west sides of the city, and basically no affordable housing downtown and on the north side. And she really sort of was hired to address and tackle that issue. She, before the pandemic, managed to overhaul the city's most powerful tool to force developers to build affordable units when they get a city subsidy or special permission. But then COVID hit, and like every other elected official in the nation, her job became very different. She oversaw just millions of dollars in rental assistance and in mortgage assistance, and she is leaving, she says, after running a 4-year race, and is looking forward to what's next. I think many people thought perhaps she would stay on under Mayor Brandon Johnson, since they seem to have similar approaches to the need to sort of spread affordable housing throughout the city to sort of counteract that legacy of segregation. But that's another appointment Johnson will have to make in the coming days.
All right, and another appointment Johnson will eventually have to make is that of police superintendent, and we're going to learn a lot more tomorrow about who the next superintendent might be. Tell us about that.
That's right. So after months of searching, the Community Commission for Public Safety and Accountability will unveil the 3 people they think Mayor Brandon Johnson should choose from, picking the city's next top cop. They meet tomorrow in a public session on the south side at 6:30. It will be the first result of this new process. This is a new commission that's never run this search before, which used to be done by the police board, and it sets up a really difficult decision for Johnson, whose superintendent will be in charge of sort of his plan to holistically approach violence and crime in Chicago.
And a couple days ago, we talked about the reports of 6 kind of semifinalists that are already kind of on that list right now. So we'll wait and see who those 3 finalists are. And then, of course, Mayor Johnson can either pick from that or start the process over again, say find 3 others for me. Hannah Mizell, I know you're focused on Springfield. Have you been paying attention to the hazing situation at Northwestern? Given the fact that there's some political intrigue, you've got big political names like Dan Webb and Maggie Hickey who are involved on both sides of this thing here.
Yeah, I mean, these are names that come up again and again in Chicago politics and investigations. Maggie Hickey, I mean, we were just talking about the Madigan situation. After Tim Mapes left, his job as chief of staff in 2018, after harassment allegations against him, she was brought in to do a kind of top to bottom investigation of the situation. And she was also, brought in on similar circumstances, not sexual harassment rather, but in other investigatory capacities under the Rauner administration. And she is a very well-respected person, but you do have to wonder, I mean, are there any other people?
Yeah. And I should mention Maggie Hickey was the one that did that report that found that corroborated the allegations of hazing. Maggie Hickey now also leading the consent decree process with the police department. Then Dan Webb, who he defended Fox News recently. He was probing Kim Fox's office. Former U.S. attorney. He is representing Pat Fitzgerald. All right, so we could talk about so much, but we're out of time right now. And my thanks to Hannah Meisel and Heather Sharon. Thanks so much. And up next, the WTTW News exclusive. Piping plovers released at Montrose Beach. Read all about it. But first, take a look at the weather. There's a major development in Chicago's bird world and a love story we've been following. This is Imani you're looking at right now. He's been Chicago's beloved but lone piping plover at Montrose Beach all summer. That is up until today. 3 endangered piping plovers were released just hours ago on a protected site at Montrose. That's the first time piping plovers were released in Chicago, and WTTW has an exclusive look at today's developments. Could Imani finally get his summer romance? This is a love story we've been following since Imani's parents, Monty and Rose, were the first set of their species to nest in Chicago in 5 decades back in 2019. Joining us with more on today's news reported first by WTTW is Armand Can, a fish and wildlife biologist with the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service, who released today's chicks into the wild at Montrose. Armand, how significant is this release of these 3 plover chicks into Montrose Beach?
Historically, I would say it's pretty significant because it has never been done. This is a population that, if anyone remembers, was listed back in 1986 with 13 pairs, and now we're all the way up to 80. We've been starting this recovery effort for the last few decades, and many of the chicks that we have released have only taken place only in Michigan. And this is the first time during the recovery of the species that we're actually releasing them outside of Michigan, and also the first time in Illinois itself.
And there they are getting used to their new digs at Montrose Beach. They're really cute. And Imani is famously the son of Monty and Rose, the famous plovers that mated here a couple years back. Imani, he was gone for the winter and he returned right to Montrose Beach, right? Just on his own.
Yeah, on his own volition. Whether it most likely is something to do with like a familiar habitat, but we can't be quite sure as to why these individuals return year after year, but they do, and it's an amazing feat. And that's
the home of his parents, Monty and Rose, named after Montrose Beach. So he's been alone. It's been kind of lonesome out there at Montrose Beach. Now he's got these 3 little chicks. Are any of them females that he could mate with?
Oh man, I can only hope that some of these chicks are females, but the truth is we don't quite know what the sexes of these chicks. They're too young for that. We will hopefully be able to tell if and when these 3 birds return next year.
And I know that bird watchers will go out there and watch to see if the mating dance happens. They have this really clever little mating dance that we saw Monty and Rose do a couple years ago, so that would be a sign that maybe Imani has found a mate. What does all this mean for the species recovery? You mentioned that it had been down to only, what, about 13 pairs, and now because of preservation efforts, it's up around 80?
Yes.
And it's all over the Great Lakes now?
Yeah, all over the Great Lakes. 13 pairs, up to 80. We were around 74 pairs last year, and the fact that we were able to increase the amount of pairs from one year to the next on a species that we're literally talking about less than 200 individuals, that's quite significant. And our ability to be able to have individuals to release in these areas, I think, is a pretty big testament to the status of where the recovery of the species is right now.
And like you're saying, you're hoping one of these is a female that Amani can mate with, because it's kind of challenging for Amani, right? I mean, now he's been alone there, but the migration patterns make it kind of difficult.
Yeah, migration patterns, I mean, who knows, maybe all the female piping plovers are just like bypassing Illinois for whatever reason. But yeah, it really is a shame, because when you have species with such small numbers, the gender differentiation from place to place, it can be very skewed, and which is not great, which is why we're trying to recover it.
So it goes to show you how precarious it still is now, trying to recover this species. Last question for you. Why do you think Monty and Rose and the plovers and Amani have really captured Chicagoans' attention?
Oh, that's a good question. Probably one that deserves its own novel one day.
Well, it had its own movie. There was a movie about there's the mating dance that Monty is doing to try and court Rose, I believe. Is that what that is?
That is it. Yeah, the male is the one moving its legs, and the female dipping down because she's interested.
And unfortunately, Monty and Rose are gone. I mean, we believe that they've died. But again, Amani is the next generation here. All right. Well, so it's hard to answer why Chicagoans are fascinated with them. How come you're fascinated with them?
I mean, I love birds. They're essentially living dinosaurs. They can go everywhere. They have an incredible, that we even have a hard time understanding, navigational ability to be able to be born in one place, is fly south all the way to the Gulf Coast without having any direction, finding your own kind, and then finding your way back to a place like that. I find that absolutely fascinating. And they've been around for essentially many millions of years.
That is so fascinating. You know what? In my next life, I want to come back as a bird. That would be a lot of fun. All right, Armand Khan, thank you so much for joining us. And for more coverage on Amani and the gang, visit our website, WTTW.com/news. Up next, how to paint Ukrainian folk art. A local artist shows us how right after this. She is an artist, an animal lover, a teacher, and a native of Ukraine. A Chicago resident for 30 years, Elena Dyadenko uses her talents to teach a traditional form of folk art and raise awareness of the ongoing war in the country where she was born. Producer Mark Vitale has the story.
We first met Elena Dyadenko at the Ukrainian National Museum in March 2022. She was selling her art to benefit the Red Cross in Ukraine, ultimately raising nearly $50,000. Many works were painted on glass. Now the artist, a Golden Apple Award-winning teacher, is giving lessons on how to make this traditional form of folk art that first flourished in the 16th century.
It is cultural tradition. Basically, self-taught artists started to paint on glass in reverse, and the themes were mostly from the Bible. So you can see a lot of Virgin Marys, a lot of icons and saints. A few hundred years later, a lot of self-taught artists who live in different villages started to paint on glass in reverse. But their themes were primarily village themes. So they would draw peasants, they would draw animals. It was really primitive style of painting. It looked really nice, very authentic, very bright, and always with black outline.
Dyadenko still raises money for the war effort, and she has a new cause. Her friend, a parish priest near Kyiv, has been caring for the many animals displaced by the Russian invasion.
So he started picking them up from eastern regions and start feeding them, start giving them medical treatments. I asked him, how many cats and dogs did you save? I say 100, 200, over 200. He told me after 200 we stopped counting.
His efforts have actually saved many more animals. To benefit the animal shelter, she now leads classes on how to make a painting using glass as a canvas.
My first class had about 23 people, and some of them had no idea how to paint. So I told them not to worry. I have a lot of sketches of my own that I gave them. And if you have to write anything that you wish to write, you have to write backwards, in reverse. You paint on one side and the image is on the opposite side of the glass. I'm an artist and I'm an educator. I'm doing this because I just cannot not do it. I have to do it to stay sane. It helps me because I feel like, what's the point to cry? You have to put yourself together and think what you can do to help. So like a soldier, that's how I see it.
For Chicago Tonight, this is Mark Vitale.
Elena Diadenko's next class is this evening at the Trezub restaurant in Ukrainian Village, and she'll teach again at the Ukrainian Institute of Modern Art on July 21st. Classes cost $60 and benefit veterans of the Ukraine war and displaced animals and pets. Find out how to reach her on our website. And that's our show for this Wednesday night. Join us tomorrow night at 5:30 and 10. Now for all of us here at Chicago Tonight, I'm Paris Schutz. Thank you for watching. Stay safe tonight, and we'll see you tomorrow.
Closed captioning is made possible by Robert A. Clifford and Clifford Law Offices, a personal injury law firm pleased to give back to the community through numerous charitable initiatives.